Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm film scholar and slippery weasel Noelle LaCroix.
And I'm story expert and cross-referencing fool Lani Diane Rich. And we're here today to talk about Earshot, the 18th episode of Season 3.
Earshot aired on September 21st, 1999, and was written by Jane Espenson and directed by Regis Kemble, who is best known as an editor. He worked on Buffy, Angel, Fargo, the TV series, and my personal favorite, American Horror Story.
I still have not seen that. I hear it's really, really great, but, you know, me and horror.
That's fine. I'll watch it for you.
Absolutely. I say as I talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Anyway, so as everybody should probably know by now, Still Pretty is a fully spoiled podcast. So if you have not watched all of Buffy and all of Angel and maybe read some of the comic books, then you're going to want to take care of that and come on back. Well, if you're not too busy having sex with my mother, then let's go on patrol. In Earshot, Buffy is attacked by two scabby, mouthless demons in the playground. She takes one out, and while she watches the other run away, we see some of the demons' glow-in-the-dark blood seep into her skin, but she doesn't seem to notice. It itches like crazy, though, so when she brings it up to Giles, he does some research.
What?
It says it can infect the host.
Infect? Infect? Giles. Infect?
Buffy is worried about the Angel Faith thing, and maybe Angel liked kissing her, but still hasn't talked to him directly about it. But what's bothering her more is Giles telling her that she will end up with an aspect of the demon, whatever that means. Angel sees her while she's walking at night, and she won't talk about Faith, but she shares her worries about what happens when her new demon part sprouts up. And Angel almost sticks the landing.
Hey, I won't let anything happen to you if I can help it. No matter what, I'll always be with you. I'll love you, even if you're covered with slime.
I liked everything until that part.
At school the next day, Buffy sits down with the group to talk about the game, and Xander is distracted by Cordelia. He wonders if Cordy and Wesley have kissed, and Buffy hears his thought. In the hallway, she hears everyone's thoughts, and kind of digs it. She visits Giles, reads his thoughts as he realizes the demons are telepathic, and that's why they don't need mouths, and she freaks him out a little bit. Buffy uses her new power to show off in class, and then it occurs to her that her new power might be of real use elsewhere. She visits Angel, but can't read his thoughts, so he gets her to finally talk.
In 243 years, I've loved exactly one person.
Oh. It is me, right?
Next time, just ask.
The next day at school, Buffy tells everyone about her power, and one by one, they all freak out and leave her there. She goes out into the hallway, more isolated than ever, and hears everyone thinking. Meanwhile, in the library, Giles comes upon some disturbing information while researching. The same thing happened to a man in Ecuador, and it didn't end well.
It's happened before. A man in Ecuador. Quite recently.
Can we contact him?
I'd say not. He can't communicate with anyone.
Dead?
No, he's in complete isolation. Power. We can't shut it off.
At lunch, Buffy hears someone think, "This time tomorrow, I kill you all." She drops her tray and touches people, trying to figure out who had the thought. but all the thoughts are overwhelming and she collapses. Everyone's thoughts are still interfering with her ability to think, so she gives as much information as she can before letting Giles take her home.
I'll be okay, right? I mean, even if you can't get rid of it.
You're fine, I promise. If it doesn't go away, she'll go insane.
The Scoobies get to work trying to find the potential killer, and Buffy goes home where Joyce tends to her as much as she can before thinking of the very thing she didn't want Buffy to know, that she had sex with Giles. Buffy can hear everyone in the neighborhood and curls up in bed, unable to handle it. At the school, Giles and Wesley need the heart of the demon in order to make the antidote. Angel gets the heart, brews the concoction, and feeds it to Buffy, who goes into seizures and then passes out. Later, when she wakes up...
Are you all right? Do you hear thoughts?
Did you find the killer?
The Scoobies have tracked down everyone on the suspect list, except for Freddie Iverson, the school newspaper editor, who has been dodging them. But when they finally confront him, they discover he was avoiding them because of a bad review that he gave Oz's band. Freddie points to his hate mail, and Cordelia starts going through it as a no longer telepathic Buffy returns.
Okay, here's the new plan. We're gonna get Snyder to evacuate the school, and just hope the killer's not waiting outside.
This time tomorrow, you all know what I've done. I'm sure you understand that I had to do it, and that although death is never easy, it's the only way.
The letter is from Jonathan, who is in the school tower assembling a rifle. Buffy sees him in the tower and rushes in to stop him, but it turns out he was planning on killing himself, no one else. As it turns out, the person wanting to kill everyone was the lunch lady, who Xander accidentally catches pouring rat poison into the food. He warns everyone and Buffy takes down the lunch lady. Later, she and Giles chat while walking on the school lawn.
I'm glad to see you've recovered from your psychic encounter more or less intact. Feel up to some training?
Sure, we can work it after school. You know, if you're not too busy having sex with my mother.
Okay, so Noelle, Earshot, what did you think overall? Did you like this episode?
The episode as a whole, not really. I like individual moments in the episode. There are some fantastic lines, but the episode as a whole, except for the fact that it feels really, really prescient with the violence at high school and really uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, it's really tough. And I'd like to take this moment just to give a quick content warning. We are going to be discussing school shootings in this episode of Still Pretty, as well as suicide. So if either of these are triggering topics for you, you may want to skip this episode and come back and hang out with us next week when we talk about choices. In Earshot, we are dealing with the idea of school shootings, which prior to this point in our history had existed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, school shootings did happen. We even get this line from Oz where he's like, they're bordering on trendy. And it was sadly prescient, because school shootings have, since the events of Columbine, which happened a week before this episode was slated to air. Columbine happened on April 20th, 1999. And as some of you may have noticed, when we talk about the air date for this, it was September 21st, 1999. So it was right before the beginning of the fourth season. They finally showed this episode, but they actually pulled it from the lineup and ended up replaying Bad Girls. And we didn't, they didn't go back to it until September, 5 months after the shooting at Columbine. And at this point in our history that there had been shootings, there had been the clock tower shooting at University of Texas at Austin. We'd seen shootings more, I think, on college campuses than necessarily in high schools. But I mean, when I was in high school, we had an incident that nobody got shot, but a girl came into this high school while I was there looking for my English teacher. And she had a rifle. She shot through the little glass panel in the door of that classroom. I was in that classroom at the time. And they were able to stop her. But my English teacher was hiding in a closet for a while this girl was looking for her.
Wow.
And didn't come back to school again for another year. So that was a hugely traumatic experience for her. And that kind of stuff, you know, when it happened at my high school, it wasn't even news. Like it was just nobody got shot, and it was like, okay, whatever. But what we didn't realize is that this was something that was starting to get into like the cultural zeitgeist. And by the time Columbine hit, it almost did set off, as horrible a word as it is to use with reference to these devastating events, a trend. Mm-hmm. You know, that we're seeing so many more of these kinds of events happening. And there are a lot of cultural like influences that contribute to that. But it's at this point, this was the exact turning point where it became so much worse than it had been. It was bad enough the way that it was, but it became so much worse. And so this episode is kind of a weird episode in the run of Buffy, and the way that it was taken out of its of its chronology and then shifted to, so people who were watching Buffy live saw this out of order, never got the things that happened in this episode, and it was really it's really disturbing now, after everything that we've been through as a country, how incredibly traumatizing and incredibly regular these events are. It is actually a source, I think, of national trauma, because these things keep happening.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and it's shocking to me. It's shocking to me how relevant Buffy as a series often feels. But of course, this episode feels especially relevant because we've seen 20 years of a real upswing in school violence since the Columbine High School massacre, and not just the fact that it happened, but the way that it was talked about in the media, the way it was publicized. I mean, you can read, if you're interested in reading the research that has been done on the Columbine High School massacre and its effect on school shootings and the sort of the environment in which, you know, kids go to school now, where they do active shooter drills. And we're finally, we're finally at a point where I think, and I want to say just in the past few months, the mainstream media has gotten hip to the fact that you don't glamorize the shooter. You don't, splash their name and picture everywhere. But it has taken, it's taken us 20 years to get there, and we're so far behind on really doing anything about the issue of gun violence in schools. I actually found all of the discussion of gun violence in school in this episode to be really, really troubling, knowing that it was, that it was written and directed when it was. And yet we still have Xander saying, who hasn't just idly thought about taking out the whole place with a semi-automatic? That's fucking chilling now.
It is incredibly chilling, especially because Xander kind of fits the, disaffected young white guy. Yeah. He kind of fits the profile of the kind of guy that we're seeing, do these things. In my particular instance, what happened at my school, it was a girl who was going after the English teacher who had failed her. It's truly disturbing.
Yeah. There are violent people of all stripes, but
of every demographic. Exactly.
Of every demographic. But when we talk about school shootings, particularly under what is called the Columbine effect, we're looking at white men. And it's it's really, really chilling.
It is.
The fact that Cordy says, because that never happens at American high schools. And of course, now it happens so much more often than when this line was written and spoken. And it's real scary.
It is. It really is. And to have this snapshot, because this was slated to air the week after, but it had been shot and edited and was ready to go like months beforehand. It was written months before. So it was written in this different space in which they were still being sarcastic about, that never happens, because it had happened.
It had happened enough
like how it's been happening since.
It had happened enough that they could joke about it in that way.
Yeah.
That Oz could say it's bordering on trendy at this point.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I know. And it's so awful when you think about like how much worse it's gotten since. And so I think that when you're looking at Earshot as an episode, it is really difficult to view it without all of that cultural knowledge and experience and national trauma that we have been having ever since. It's hard to see this episode without that element weighing so heavily on it, you know? And the thing is that in reality, though, that part of the episode isn't in reality about a mass school shooting.
Right.
It's about a kid in so much pain that he's trying to kill himself.
Yeah.
Now, why he needs a rifle with a scope on it. I mean, I think I don't know. I think, like, the rifle looks really long. It seems like a really difficult choice, but if it's all you got, I guess, you know.
Yeah, but, I mean, my mind is going a place that I don't want it to go, because I think talking about suicide and methods of suicide is super, super problematic, even with a content warning on the episode. So I'm not going to address like I'm not going to address the method here. The rifle is there. Sure. The rifle and the tower are there as a misdirect because we are still at that point. When we see Jonathan in the tower, we're still thinking he is up there intent on mass murder.
Right. So, and that's part of it, because the evidence that we're giving, that is the kind of thing that someone would use to kill other people, and not necessarily, it wouldn't be that easy to use for themselves. So, I mean, part of that, well, you know, I think you're right. We shouldn't necessarily be going into like the whole methodology of it. It is something that is deliberately put in there to mislead us, so that we think that what he's doing is planning on killing a bunch of people. And the thing is that because that is there for the misdirect, because this whole thing is about Buffy thinks that he's going to shoot a bunch of people, he is just there to kill himself. When we get that twist, when we get that moment where we realize that Jonathan is there to kill himself, then we don't deal with that. We don't address the suicide. We don't address any, we just rush off because there's still somebody out there who is actually going to try to kill a bunch of students.
Right.
And now that Jonathan has been, you know, the gun has been taken away and he's not going to hurt himself, we just sort of let that go.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, that's a big deal.
Well, he's not going to hurt himself right now.
Right
but
now.
You don't like a little chat with Buffy is not going to make someone who is feeling suicidal suddenly not feel suicidal anymore.
And who was ready to, in that moment, was ready to do this thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you presume that he wrote the letter to the newspaper, right? A letter which had been opened and somebody had read. So
had it? Like, was it in an envelope ever? Did he just like fold it up and put it on?
Cordelia picked up this open sheet of paper that was lying in a pile that had clearly been opened, and you would think somebody had read it, that has that in it. You know, by this time, you know, you will know what I've done and all this kind of stuff. So he sent out a suicide note to the school newspaper, and was doing this thing, you know, up in the school tower. So I don't know. It feels like we're not addressing at all Jonathan's suicide attempt. It's almost like it's just there about the twist. You know, we're just there to do that twist, and we're not really addressing like how many kids do commit suicide because they're in such a tremendous amount of pain, you know. And what's interesting too is that we've got this, you know, in this episode where the prospect of Buffy's intense isolation would lead to insanity, which we see with what happened to the man in Ecuador. You know, we come upon Jonathan's isolation, which is pushing him to the point where he wants to take his own life. And, you know, and I mean, the thing is, like, there is a point, I think, where you are in such an incredible amount of pain that it's not necessarily that you want to die. You just want the pain to stop.
Yeah.
You know? And that's where a lot of like suicidal ideation, you know, which is where, you know, you think about suicide in a positive way, maybe not necessarily planning for it, but it's kind of like, oh, wow, you know, if a truck just took me out, you know, maybe that wouldn't be so bad, right? You know, if something terrible just happened, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, you know? And then you move through the phases where you start to plan, where you start to think about how you would do it. And when you get to the point where Jonathan is at, there's been so much pain for so long, you know, that again, one quick chat with Buffy saying everybody's in pain, get over it.
Yeah.
Right. Essentially it's everybody's in pain, get over yourself.
Yeah.
And that I think is not a helpful message for people who are in pain because, you know, a comparison in almost every context is a useless thing, you know? But especially in this context, like everybody else's pain is kind of irrelevant because them being in pain does not make you less in pain.
Right.
You know, that knowledge might make you feel a little less isolated. So if we're talking about isolation, there could be that. But overall, we don't address that at all. And it almost becomes kind of a punchline. Oh, I wasn't going to kill everybody else. I wouldn't hurt anybody. You know?
Yeah.
It's a little bit difficult.
Yeah, it's unsettling. It's a twist that isn't like I understand why it's there. I like it. It's one of those things that I like narratively, but the way that it's handled I think is really unfortunate.
I think you have to earn some things. Yeah. You have to earn certain things to talk about them,
and Jonathan up till this point has just been this kind of background character who's there for comedy.
Yeah, he's the butt of the joke.
He's the butt of the joke always. And, you know, sometimes with his knowledge, Harmony making fun of him as a potential...
Right. We've got your new boyfriend.
Exactly, as a potential next boyfriend for Cordelia. And he's also just been the butt of the joke, you know, for the audience. He's set up to be the punchline for a scene, or he's set up to be this kind of, like... bumbling incongruous element in a scene. And we don't, and I love the idea of giving him some depth. I love the idea of, you know, this character who has been the butt of the joke having this inner life of his own that is, you know, really, really, you know, he's really struggling. But we go from zero to tragedy with Jonathan, and I don't know that it works.
I think it's an awkward transition for this, and while I think seeing Jonathan as an actual human being with actual, you know, feelings as opposed to just the guy that we can make the joke with, I think is a nice place to go. And we're going to do a lot more with Jonathan throughout the run of the series. I mean, Jonathan is going to be actually, you know, a very pivotal at certain points in the run of the series.
Where Jonathan goes from here is wonderful.
Where Jonathan goes from here.
We talk about,
oh God, he's amazing.
You know, we talk about, oh, you can't just, you know, change the world and not have consequences. And then, of course, Jonathan's going to go on to cast a spell that
exactly
makes
that.
him...
It's going to take a long time for him to learn that lesson.
So, you know, I love setting Jonathan up to be a bigger character. But we do end up kind of trivializing his suicide attempt with where the focus is for this episode, but then also, you know, and then it's like in conclusion, and we see Buffy and Giles walking along, and, you know, Buffy's been visiting him, and he's, you know, home, presumably. And then we're like joking about his look of gratitude and how she says, what is it? She says that he's got that look like he's going to ask me to prom.
Right.
And
which, you know, is
cute.
sweet.
It's cute
and then when
sweet.
we go ahead to what happens at prom, what he actually does at prom, which is amazing. Yeah, I think that's...
But it definitely whiffs of that, like, oh, just a little, just having Buffy intervene is enough.
It's magical. And then we have this whole thing where he then, again, becomes the butt of the joke. Oh, please, he's like 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
Right? First of all, man does not have to be tall to be a man. I'm sorry. Tyrion Lannister, one of the sexiest motherfuckers out there. That's all I'm going to say. So, that whole idea that because he's not tall enough, I think metaphorically, you need to be quote unquote tall enough to get on this ride, if you know what I mean. But that does not necessarily mean physically tall. And so the idea that we go then again to making this guy whose humanity and pain was just such a pivotal part of this episode, again, the butt of the joke, is a little bit disappointing. But before we shift away from this discussion, I would like to say to anybody listening that the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. And there are people there who can absolutely help you through whatever it is that you're going through and give you some help. But you're not alone. It doesn't just happen to you. Lots of people feel this way. Lots of people end up having their lives get better. I can tell you right now, at this point in my life, I'm happier than I think I've ever been. But I had to go through a really, really hard place to get here, and it was really difficult. So I understand completely how you're feeling. There is hope. And I hope that if you are listening to this and you're in that kind of pain, that you at least try to reach out and let some people help you, because it can get so much better. So much better.
Yeah. Sometimes just saying how awful it feels helps it to feel less awful.
It really does. Okay, so now that we've had all of these discussions that have really been very deep and heavy, we've cleared out some of the bigger issues that sort of weigh down Earshot. Let's get back into this episode and talk a little bit about the stuff that's going on here. And I actually found it to be really interesting in terms of some of the philosophy that's going on in this episode. I love this idea of our thoughts and our identity.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what are we? What defines us? We have the classic Descartes, I think, therefore I am. But what does that freaking mean? Like,
what does that mean?
Where what is it that defines us? Is it our thoughts? Is it our brain? Is it our soul? This thing that we can't, define. But we have Buffy, when she starts talking about this, she's like, I could be something that's not me anymore. When she's talking about this aspect of the demon, like, what is it going to do to her? How is it going to change her essential identity if she ends up with horns or a tail or something, that she is no longer going to be her? At what point do we cease to be us? And we have this whole meditation from Oz, which I absolutely adore when we get Oz's interiority.
God.
I am my thoughts. If they exist in her, Buffy contains everything that is me, and she becomes me. I cease to exist. And then he just goes, huh.
It's so good. It's so good.
It is so fantastic. But I don't know, Noelle, what do you think about that? Like, if somebody can read thoughts, if they have access to the thoughts of other people, does the boundary between who is me and who is them, does that somehow become a little shady?
I mean, maybe. Maybe. It's a really something that gets kind of lost in the din of this episode. Sorry. Is that philosophical, like, wait a minute, if you can read someone's mind, like, what, like, I'm thinking about Buffy in English class, where she's, this shining star of the class this day because she's hearing the thoughts of the people around her. She didn't do the reading. She didn't reflect on the reading. Mm-hmm. She's effectively cheating, but it's such an interesting problem of, because we learn pretty quickly that she can't help it, that she's hearing these thoughts whether she wants to or not. My favorite moment of that is when Willow is speaking to her about, how great it is that, Buffy can, like, she's got this new, she's got this new Slayer power, and it's great. And her words are saying how great it is, and she's smiling, but then in her head, she's, she's not going to need me anymore. You don't need me.
Right.
So, it's not exactly a gift. Angel calls it a gift at one point. I was like,
yeah,
but
yeah, not exactly.
But identity, like the question of identity and, our thoughts making us who we are is just a fascinating question. I have no answers other than that is fascinating. But what's interesting to me about the way Buffy describes this, like this identity crisis effectively that she's having sounds an awful lot like pregnancy to me. Like the concerns that she raises about, changes to the physical body, but also changes to like who she is. Yeah. Really, really sounds like the concerns that a lot of pregnant people voice, whether they intended to become pregnant or not.
Well, you have a real living other human being inside your body made from you. Like, it's weird. Like, if you actually think about pregnancy, and I hope like anybody out there who's like pregnant right now listening to us and they're like, oh my God, it's bizarre. This like something has happened to my body is changing, and my identity is changing. Potentially. Because at this point, she has no idea what's going to happen to her. It's just something will happen. Book's not going to tell you what. There's no way, there's no way of knowing. And it's just, yet again, we have the female body / mind as a site for trauma. And I understand that not everyone who becomes pregnant is female. That's, we're using gendered language because we are watching a gendered show with a gendered kind of philosophy to it. But I just want to acknowledge all of my trans friends out there. I see you. I love you. I'm glad you're here. She's, but that that concern over her personal space, her physical personal space. And then once the telepathy takes hold, her line to Giles about her experience of telepathy really points to the experience of mental illness and intrusive thoughts. Yeah. She says, I can't shut it out, Giles. It's like this invasion of my head. It's like there are these strangers walking around in here. And she then, she wants to continue to be, in the school to figure out who this potential murderer might be. But she says, look at this. I can't even be around people anymore. And that hit me so hard as a really accurate representation of certain kinds of mental illness where you want to do the thing. You want to do the thing, but your experience of the world just makes it impossible, whether it's anxiety or depression or issues with sensory processing. Like, I think there's a lot to be said about earshot and disability. And I'm not sure that that's what Jane Espenson was intending to talk about. I think it was a little bit, I think the episode is a little bit more in the be careful what you wish for category, where at first it seems great. It's like, oh, I can hear what everyone is thinking. Principal Snyder has walk like an Egyptian stuck in his head. It's like, it's fun. It's kind of fun. It's kind of funny. Right. But then it becomes incredibly isolating, which of course, it becomes overwhelming.
And isolating and debilitating. She can't function by the time this has really taken hold. Which, we could go all kinds of directions with this. We could talk about mental illness and disability. We could also talk about the responsibility of being extraordinary in a certain way. That, here we go again, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. That we always come back to that.
We come back to that forever.
But it's true. It's really true. And here's the thing, for Buffy, it isn't just, it's a violation. It's a violation of other people. It's a violation of herself, right? Right. Because she can't control it. If she could control it and was still eavesdropping on other people, then that would be a real question, right? But she has absolutely no control over this. She can neither reach out for it nor shut it out, and that's what makes it devastating for her. If she had the power and could shut it down, could not reach into other people's minds, then she would be able to judiciously use that power, applying her sense of personal responsibility. But because this power comes in a way that is debilitating and is uncontrollable, it really does kind of have that parallel with this idea of mental illness. And I actually sympathize with this a great deal. And I recently did a video for this. I'm doing a video series with Ian Martin from Passion of the Nerd. We're doing a year-long kind of chat back and forth with each other called Nerd Chipper. And in mine, I talked about empathy and actually used Earshot as sort of an illustration of what that's like. That with empathy, you're not reading people's minds. You're reading people's feelings based on their micro expressions, on their intonation, on their word choices, on everything. You're basically reading everything and feeling everything that they're feeling, and it comes, and there is a point where you're reading it, in which case you can be completely wrong, but you're reading it and feeling it anyway. There are times where it is absolutely explicit how somebody is feeling and the pain that they're going through, and you actually literally feel their pain. I have had situations where I'll see, like, this is why I have trouble watching horror movies. If I see somebody get hurt, I will feel pain. I may not feel like if they get their pinky, cut off, I may not feel it in my pinky, but I feel the pain. I feel pain in like the center of my body, like the center of my being actually processes that pain. And so for me, it is very difficult for me to be around. I'm an extrovert, but it's difficult for me to be around people too much. If I'm around somebody with negative energy, if I'm around somebody who's going through a really difficult time, if I'm around somebody who's in any kind of pain, be it emotional or physical, and let's face it, almost everybody's in emotional pain all the time, because our culture is abusive, so everybody's upset. So all of these things, I feel, like, believe it or not, very empathetic towards Buffy's situation in this context, because it sometimes does feel like that. It feels really overwhelming. And I find I have to isolate myself a lot. For an extrovert, I have to isolate myself a lot because connecting with people can be like this for me, and it's very, very difficult to deal with that. So it is interesting with this. It does feel a bit like a monkey's paw, a bit like a be careful what you wish for situation. And then what I love too is that she has this thing. She has this great moment in class. She's, using this for, to make her seem like she understands Othello and Iago. And of course, we're talking about Othello and Iago, Iago being the dark side of Othello himself, right?
And jealousy and that reading on that. Everything that Buffy's going through with Angel and Faith.
With Angel and Faith. Right. And so then she immediately goes to Angel, right? Ready to read his mind. She's bringing up Faith and she's just trying to read him. And then he just says that, like the mirror, there's no reflection in me. Like, you can't read my mind. And he knows exactly what she's doing. But I love too that he forces her to sit down and actually talk about what's bothering her.
Yeah.
And it's really nice. I love Angel in this episode.
Oh my God. Yeah, I do too. I have big feelings about Angel in this episode.
I love it. What are your big feelings?
I have big feelings about Angel in this. Okay. So I genuinely like Angel in this episode a whole lot. And if this was the Angel that we'd had all along, I would probably be swooning over him big time from the start. He says, I've lived a long time, Buffy, and I'm past that. He's talking about being with girls like Faith. And I love this idea. I mean, because, and unfortunately, I don't think it really plays out in Buffy up until this point. He doesn't seem to be past some of his other adolescent bullshit. So I don't know. But that is what I would have loved to have seen. The guy who looks 23, but is wise and self-aware and able to extend that to others because he's actually 243 and has had all of this extra time to like read and reflect and work on things and see how the world works. He is he's just lovely in this episode, and he's hilarious. He's so funny.
Yes. Oh my God, it's so cute. It's so
and then
cute.
to end that scene on his complete deadpan, I'm a funny guy. Like, I can't do it. I do no justice to it. It's hilarious.
No, it is really, really good. And this is actually the Angel that I like the best, too. This is the Angel that we see, I think, more in his series, necessarily than we do here. Although we've seen him a bit. We saw him in Gingerbread. When he gave the why we fight, discussion with Buffy. And I thought that was fantastic. I loved that. But I mean, the thing is that, like, how Angel was originally built, Angel 1.0, right? Is this broody, tormented, Byronic hero, this, Heathcliff wailing on the moors bullshit that I hate. It gets so old. I hate Heathcliff. I think Wuthering Heights sucks. I hate that book. I hate everything about it. And that kind of character, just like this, tormented and knowing that he's wrong and bad, but like living with the all of this kind of stuff. I have so little patience for that. And so Angel with his brooding doesn't necessarily do it for me, but Angel, this wisdom, this kindness, this directness, this lack of fear of honesty. It's not that he has to be courageous, because when you're courageous, you are pushing past a fear that exists. Like, I don't think he's afraid of being honest. I think he's like, honesty and talking about things and being straightforward, that's the only way to go.
Yeah.
Like everything else has consequences, and a lack of honesty has consequences, but honesty itself has only the truth to uncover.
Yeah.
And that's, so I think that he's like gotten to that, which I absolutely love about him. I love his philosophy on why we fight. I love his philosophy on if nothing we do matters, the only thing that matters is what we do. That's over from the Angel series. That's why I watched the Angel series. That moment sells me on all of it. I mean, there's lots of other good stuff there, but that moment sells me on everything because of this deep philosophy that anchors Angel and that makes Angel what he is when he's at his best. And this is exactly the Angel that is at his best. I love all of this.
He's so, so good. And then, of course, he ends up, he's very brave. He goes and fights the demon and he gets the heart and he feeds, we get to see Chekhov's glowy blood pay off with the, I'm like, oh, there it is. Oh, that looks not good.
Yes.
Props to props on that. The glass decanter with the bits of floaty.
What is that?
It's bits of floaty demon heart.
It's got a mix of floaty stuff.
I love the floaties. The floaties make it for me.
The floaties make it, and it's also got that really tiny like spout. So I guess the big parts, the chunks can't get into her while she's.
It's a vampire decanter. It's fine.
It's a vampire decanter, as you find. You just find them in the glass aisle at Walmart.
Well, I was going to say you go down to your local antique shop, and I'm sure you'll find one.
Local antique
or
shop.
Rite Aid. Rite Aid. Why does Rite Aid not sell ritual supplies? Come on. They called themselves Rite Aid.
I don't know.
Anyway.
Exactly.
Which humor?
Anyway. Yes. I just got it. All right, I'm sorry.
Never apologize.
Yes, no, I was like, yeah, I was running along with your joke. I'm like, yeah, because that's fine. I thought it was funny because you were just like, look at the store on the corner, the way I made the Walmart joke, and I thought it was the same as the Walmart joke, but it's not because of writing.
We are writers. This is what we do. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So something else that I absolutely loved in this episode is Giles and Wesley. These two working together. Wesley has redeemed himself a little bit, but still remains the classic stuffed shirt, right? But these two as foils for one another is so lovely. I mean, Wesley is there basically reflecting what Giles used to be, or at least the way he used to present himself. And in reality, Giles is much, much more complex than our, tweed suited 3-piece, vest thing that he always used to do, In reality, reality is much more complex. And of course, as we will discover, so is Wesley. As we move through Wesley's entire story arc, from here to the end of Angel the series. But it brings up this idea that we explore in Earshot, that the external controlled projection of ourselves is often like our attempt at creating an aspirational sense of self, and the reality underneath is so much more complex and self-contradictory, with the exception of Cordelia.
Cordelia, yeah.
Right. And in other episodes, Spike and Anya, whoever our truth teller is.
Oh, God.
Cordelia, I love. I don't see what this has to do with me, she thinks. And then immediately, I don't see what this has to do with me. She is exactly, who she is projecting is exactly who she is inside. And that harmony, that essential honesty, I think is a really positive and aspirational trait. Again, not being afraid of the consequences of honesty, because the consequences of dishonesty are always worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I loved that.
Well, and Cordelia gets one of my favorite lines in this episode, and possibly of the whole series. Xander tells her she has no shame, and she says, "Oh, please, like shame is something to be proud of." Right. I love it so much. I love it.
And
like,
it's
don't,
great.
Cordelia, like, she's like, don't even bring me shame. Like, I don't know what that, like, I don't know what that is. That's not a good, like, I love it so much. It makes me so happy. But the other person who is very similar in their thoughts and what they say is Giles.
Yes.
He's not quite word for word the way Cordelia is, but...
Well, and he would withhold some things, too. Like there are some things that he doesn't say because it is not the best moment to perhaps say.
Right.
If she, like, the moment where he's really worried about Buffy and he thinks if we don't stop this, she's going to go insane. And so that's something that he wouldn't say, but he is always thinking along the same lines of whatever it is he's projecting. But with other characters, I mean, Willow too, I think Willow holds back the things. She's like Giles. She's genuine in what she's thinking, but what she's thinking, she doesn't always necessarily share, and that's okay. And then we shift over into like Xander and Wesley.
Oh God,
right?
Boys.
Who are both falling, victim to the imp of the perverse, which is Edgar Allan Poe wrote this short story, this kind of it's sort of a narrative essay on the imp of the perverse, which is essentially about our own self-destructive impulses, the things that we do and think not because we want to, but specifically because we're not supposed to. So those things, those ideas, those thoughts that just pop into your head, that are suddenly like, you're driving across a bridge or something, you suddenly think, I could turn the wheel and just go right off the bridge. Like, okay, maybe I'm the only one who's
I've had that thought. I was letting you finish your thought, but go on.
Okay. I don't know, but I mean, it's one of those things. So, like, I don't know. I've had that. Does anybody else have that? But it's like, it's not that I intend to do it. It's not that I want to do it. Now, of course, Noelle will never get in a car with me again. But it's not that I intend to do it or that I want to do it. It's the idea, knowing that I'm not supposed to and that I don't want to, is part of what makes me have that thought. And I think that we have this, we have this whole thing with Xander where he's like, what am I going to do? I think about sex all the time. Sex, help. 4 times 5 is 30, which of course,
I love this so much.
5 times 6 is 32. I don't know. It cracks me up that his math is bad. He's using his math.
It makes me so happy that his mental math that he's doing to try to distract himself from thinking about naked girls is wrong. I love it. I don't like that. That is such a genius bit of characterization. It's so perfect for Xander. I love it so much.
It is. I mean, there's so much wrapped up in this one little part with Xander. And then he's like, naked girls, naked women, naked Buffy. Oh, stop me. And then he runs, because he can't stop. The imp of the perverse is so strong within Xander, that he is thinking things simply because he knows that he shouldn't be, that he doesn't want to be thinking about that.
I kind of want to call Xander the imp of the perverse. Like so often he says the thing that you really shouldn't say that in this scenario. Like, come on, man. on.
Yeah.
Get it together, Xander.
Yeah. And talk about self-destructive impulses. I mean,
poor Xander.
That's Xander. Xander is the imp of
poor
the
Xander.
perverse. He really
but you
is.
and I had a disagreement about Xander in this episode.
Yes.
When the Scoobies are doing their investigation, and Willow has made them these quizzes to administer to everyone who is in the cafeteria, which of course she did, and then she tells them to write neatly and label their work. We're foreshadowing the Professor Willow who doesn't ever really pay off. But that's okay. I still like it. But Xander is administering his questionnaire to three girls in the school stairwell.
Yeah.
And he's asking them questions about turn-ons and turn-offs and dating preferences. And I thought this was kind of adorable. And you bounced off of it. And I think that's I mean, that's interesting.
No, because to me it's gross Xander once again. Because first of all, like he's using this opportunity to figure out who's going to try to like kill everybody, and we're on a clock here. Like somebody is trying to kill everybody, and he's using it to kind of creep on these girls and like get information, like do basically a focus group, a seduction focus group for these girls, and I find that to be one, creepy in and of itself, the way that he's like using this as an excuse to creep on these girls, and also the fact that like somebody's gonna die, like there's somebody's gonna kill everybody. Let's keep focused, Xander. This is not what we're here to do. So I mean that annoyed me with Xander, and I don't know. So what did you think?
I mean, I liked it. I think because I just headcanoned that Xander was doing what he was told to do, that he was following along with the quiz, but then also taking the opportunity to insert these other questions into I mean, he's doing research, right? Like he's just doing like, I think the wannabe researcher in me is just like very for this of like, we're going to, like Russian nesting doll our questions, in among some other questions, which you're absolutely right. They are on the clock. And of course it's Xander not being on the clock that then ends up saving everybody because he gets distracted by the Jell-O.
Yeah.
Of all things.
Yeah.
Of all things. Like, is that, I mean, it's the
Yeah.
funny answer. That's why.
Nope, that's.
But he gets, he gets distracted by the Jell-O and sees the lunch lady pouring rat poison into, this giant vat of mulligan
whatever.
stew, presumably, because we've set that joke up. Maybe, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But, it's that not being on task with Xander that ends up saving the day, which I, again, have like complicated feelings about because it feels very right for Xander, but also kind of unearned. Like really, you weren't
also kind of unearned.
You weren't doing what you were supposed to do, so you get the air quotes reward of being correct about. I don't know.
To fail upwards. That's Xander. That's classic. That's the classic kind of thing that happens to Xander. Yeah, I don't know. It annoyed me. And just like, I don't know, Xander's not so bad in this episode. And like the thing is that like we're getting like this honest sense of who he is, deep down. It's always funny. Xander is always funny. But yeah, like creeping on the girls when we're supposed to be saving people who could get killed, like that just annoyed me. But I'm glad that you appreciated it. I'm glad that you liked it, because I do, like, I have very complicated but very loving feelings towards Xander. Even when he's screwing up, he's still kind of adorable. But Wesley too, though. The Wesley and Cordelia thing.
Yeah.
When he's thinking about, like, because what was it, like, I think it was just last week where I was like, Wesley is not doing anything with it. He's shutting it down. Good for Wesley. And I apparently forgot about this internal where he's like, Cordelia, but at least he shuts it down. Bad man.
He's attempting to shut it down within himself.
Acknowledging that she's beautiful. I mean, I guess you can't blame him for acknowledging that she's beautiful. He's not acting on it, and he's not indulging even the fantasy in himself. So there is that. So that's
and I
good.
love him disappearing to the office. Can you hear me thinking in here?
I know. Can you hear me in here? Because I can go out into the hall.
Oh, Wesley.
It's so cute.
Oh, Wesley.
It's so cute. But I love, getting back to like Wesley reflecting Giles, there's this moment right after Giles is failing to come up with anything for what the mayor's possible plans are,
Right.
and Wesley just dances in behind Giles in the middle of the meeting. And you see the two of them next to each other. And Giles has gotten rid of his tweed jacket, his tweed vest. Now he just has suspenders and a tie, and he looks amazing.
Speaking of identity crises, who is Giles without his tweed?
God. Who is Giles without his tweed? Giles is hot without his tweed. I mean, he was hot with it, but he is hot without it. I am loving this Giles. I love Giles through the whole thing. Every flavor of Giles is my favorite flavor of Giles. I'm not going to lie. But this is just incredibly, I love the way he's just so much more relaxed, And then we have Wesley right next to him, right? In this Dapper Dan getup, down to this bright yellow tie and the perfectly folded silk pocket square.
Oh, yeah.
Like, hello, Dandy Wesley. Which also makes me realize that I love all flavors of Wesley as well. I think, and I'm not sure, I think that British men might be my downfall. I think that there's something about British men.
Uh-oh.
I think I must move to the UK at some point because I have a thing for British men. I can't help it. I'm not going to lie. But it's so incredibly cute. I love that relationship. I love the way that Wesley kind of reflects who Giles has been. And Giles is the evolution. They're
like Pokemon, like Watchers Council Pokemon.
They are. They're like
Wesley
Watcher
Wyndham
Pokemon.
Price evolves into Rupert Giles.
I know. Gotta catch them all. Speaking of Watchers, though, I will catch all the British Watchers, I'm telling you. But speaking of Watchers, we got another message from our Watchers Council. It's you again. And it's me, Brian E. Wheaton, taking a moment together out of our day to spend in community, to appreciate our slayers and to mourn the sudden disappearance and, we fear, likely death of our own Clive Fletcher. I have known Clive personally for many years and have counted him among my dearest and most trusted friends. It has been difficult to even come in the office as though nothing has happened, but you know how we Brits are, stiff upper lip and all that. Keep calm, carry on. A watcher's work is never done, now is it? But speaking of work that's also never done, you're listening now to a podcast produced by Chipperish Media, and it's not the only one they produce. Oh no, there are podcasts about Star Wars, Good Omens, Angel the Vampire with a Soul. They talk about how stories work and explosive inspiration and courage, creativity, and the call to adventure. They've got quite the collection, and all they ask is a few dollars a month so they can keep their content free and ad-free for everyone who listens. And we at the Watchers Council would certainly take it amiss if suddenly their support dried up and they couldn't talk about us anymore. Wouldn't that just be terrible? Chipperish Media really are fantastic, aren't they? I certainly hope nothing happens to them. So go on, visit patreon.com/chipperish and kick in $1 or more a month or whatever you can afford to keep them going. Because they just do seem to keep going, don't they? Such busy little bees. Yes. All right. Thank you so much to the Watchers Council for giving us yet another message to enjoy. So Noelle, what are you wearing?
Oh my goodness. You talked about Dapper Wesley and Giles losing the tweed.
Yes.
I love this, we talked about this narrative of isolation with Buffy from her friend group, which of course is, Buffy's thing all along. Right. That's not new. But I love at the Courtyard Pep Rally, everyone's got their red and gold on, go Razorbacks, right? Willow's wearing her red hoodie to support Percy because he's needy.
I know. And Percy, though, I like Percy's, academic achievement now that he's afraid of Willow. I think that's pretty cool.
Yes. He takes her seriously. He knows that she's not,
he respects
she's not
her.
Dicking around. And I like Willow being into basketball. I think that's really very cute.
Yes.
So she's got her red hoodie on. Xander has his yellow sweater, and Oz has these red panels in his button front shirt, and then he's got his bright blonde hair. So even Oz, who kind of could not care less about sports is still like repping the school colors. And I think it's just so cute.
No,
and of course,
very nice.
You know, we have this narrative, this little side story of everyone is going to the basketball game and Buffy's not, because Buffy is Buffy and patrolling. Buffy's in pink on pink. She's got this sleeveless top with her cardigan tied around her shoulders. So not only does she kind of visually clash with everyone, pink is not exactly a complementary color with the Razorbacks red and gold. Yeah, but she has this thing wrapped around her, like literally weighing her down visually.
Yeah.
Which is so like subtle, but a perfect example of the kind of characterization and the tone that you can create in a scene visually with what your characters are wearing. Mm-hmm. It's just, it was really striking. I noticed that pink right away and I was like, that doesn't really go. And it doesn't.
No, it shows her like out of sync with her community, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I love a vampire in the sun blanket. I know it's not, it's not meaningful, especially, although it does, raise all kinds of questions about like, how does the whole sunlight thing work with vampire? Yeah, we don't care.
It does, if they're just covered up. But I mean, he's clearly smoking.
Yes,
so
which
just
I
being
love.
Out.
It's such a great visual effect. It does I don't know. I love the vampire relationship to sunlight and the way this show does that visually. I mean, I have fangirled about Spike catching his hand on fire.
I know
already, but that like the smoking blanket is so perfectly.
It is.
I don't know.
It's so great.
It's great. There's something just really, really wonderful about it, and I love it.
I absolutely love it. I think it's so fantastic. I also loved in the opening when Buffy was wearing her little red hooded jacket. It's not the same Little Red Riding Hood jacket from Helpless, and I don't believe that we have any of the same thematic elements that we saw in Helpless with Little Red Riding Hood. But it's just for me, it was fun. Whenever I see her in a little red hooded jacket, I was
Buffy has some amazing outerwear.
She really, really does.
Yes. Yeah.
She really, really does. All right. So we've got a little bit of the patriarchy for this week.
I mean, we get to hear, because we're getting to hear inside everybody's heads, we get to hear everybody's really gross thoughts about the stuff. But of course, here's a question. Like, is it sexist and patriarchal if it's in our own heads and no one hears it normally? I want to say yes, because of course it's informed by, it's informed by the patriarchal society we live in, but I don't know.
It's still sexist and patriarchal, but it's also just because those thoughts are in our heads because we live in a sexist, racist, patriarchal society, right? So we live in a society that feeds us these ideas constantly, and there are things, and I mean, there have been tests that have been done about implicit bias, where people who are deliberately and consciously not not living a life where they are not behaving on that bias still have it. And because that's how we're taught, that's how our brains are formed, because we live in a society that does that. So the thing is, having the thoughts your thoughts are your private thing, but thoughts are powerful and dangerous. So the thoughts that we don't choose, we can't be responsible for. But we do need to try to consciously form our thoughts as much as possible, because the things that we think are the things that we are eventually going to believe.
Right.
And this
Don't believe everything you think.
Exactly. I mean, this is true not just with, with like the poisonous kind of ideas that permeate our society, like, white supremacy and the patriarchy and all of that. But this is true even with ideas that you have about yourself. If you think to yourself all the time, I am unlovable, I'm no good, I'm terrible, I'm this, I'm that. If you have that bitchy voice inside that's constantly tearing you down, those are things that you are going to believe and then eventually behave on, So you do have to be very careful with what you think, but I don't think I would necessarily hold somebody morally responsible for the thoughts that flit through their head in a moment, because a lot of the things that flit through our head are not really us. They're sort of planted there. But again, that goes back to that idea about what is us.
Think, therefore,
what defines us.
Yeah.
Where is our identity?
Our
I think, therefore, are we our thoughts? I mean, there's a lot of like really, I think, interesting and slightly disorienting discussion to be had about that. Like, what is it that is essentially us? What makes us essentially ourselves? You know, how does all that work? Is it our thoughts? Is it our soul? What is our identity? If you have parts of your body replaced, you know, that's still you.
Yeah.
Like, so it's really, identity is a really interesting discussion, and not one that is as easily had as we might think, which I think is part of the reason why we cling so tightly to various identities. I mean, one of the things that I teach about vulnerability, the sources of vulnerability, fear, love, shame, you know, which all makes sense, right? And then I throw in identity there. And when I start teaching that, especially with like these young, 20-year-old students in my college classes, when I start talking about that, they all look at me like, identity. And then once we start talking about it, once we start actually digging into identity, what is me? Who am I? How do I, like, identity connects you with community and belonging. Identity gives you a sense of who you are. Identity, like if you're somebody who, I have a good friend who grew up fundamentalist Christian, right? And then suddenly like looked at it in like his 20s and realized that didn't make sense, that it fell apart under examination, under critical thought examination for him. And then, so when you believe it, like he spent his whole life believing in this thing as being absolutely true, and then coming slowly to this realization that it wasn't true. Who is he now? Like, I mean, that's a huge identity crisis. Identity crisis happens when we come to terms with our sexuality, wherever it may be, on a spectrum. Identity comes in when we think about, who we are politically, what we believe in politically, what our job is. It comes in from basic demographics. Gender is a huge thing with identity. And when you lose access, when you lose a strong connection with something with which you have strongly identified, you don't know who you are. Like that is a huge destabilizing thing. And that is an incredible amount of vulnerability. So when you start looking at the actual like philosophies of identity, and realize that almost all of it can be kind of, destabilized, like almost like what is identity? Who are we? Is it as solid as we think it is? Because I think that identity can be fluid in a lot of ways for a lot of people. It's bizarre. Like you think about like babies, right? You and I have both had babies.
Yes.
Right? We have brought little tiny humans home from the hospital. We now have much bigger humans in our house.
Yes.
Right? So I look at this big human and I think the baby is gone. That baby that I brought home from the hospital is gone. This child, this woman, Jesus Christ, she's 20, this woman is no longer that baby. And like, so, but she is.
Yes.
But she's that baby, but she's not that baby.
Yeah.
So it's such a bizarre thing. And you see children go through this constant transition, and you have to think when they're figuring out what their identity is. I mean, that is a hugely like, I'm going off on this whole thing. This is not even about Earshot. I'm just
I love it. No, it's good.
About identity. But when you start digging, if you look too closely, it's like the abyss. Don't look into the abyss. It starts to look back into you. When you look too closely at identity, you realize that it is all a flimsy construct, Really?
A little bit.
What's solid about identity? I don't even know.
Well, it's funny.
I don't even know. Yeah. Every 7 years, our entire physical being is replaced in this ship of Theseus nightmare. Like, what is that?
Well, that's not true, because if you are a person who is born with ovaries, you have all of the egg cells in your ovaries that you will ever have. So
some of it's still the same.
Some of it is
my
the same.
actual physical cells have all died and been replaced by new ones.
Yeah.
Like,
You're like the surface
like
of your
6 or
tongue
7
changes
times at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, the surface of your tongue changes, which is why, foods that didn't appeal will suddenly appeal and vice versa. Anyway,
Everything changes.
but you mentioned sexuality, and something that I wanted to bring up that was in my notes, that was in your notes, that we didn't talk about was Gay Larry. It's the last
Gay
week.
Larry, I love him so much.
It's the last week of Pride Month. I feel like we have to give a shout out to Gay Larry, living his best gay life. His grandmother is setting him up with guys. He's happy in his truth.
And he's so secure. Kind. He's so gentle. The way that he is so caring for Xander and Xander's fragile sexuality. I love, and he's like, you could make an announcement in the paper. Like, we would support you. Like, Larry,
that's a great idea, Larry. Like, that's a really...
Larry has my heart. I mean, this disgusting, misogynistic pig from season 2, right?
Oh, God.
Suddenly releases all of that bullshit, completely transitions. Larry is not Larry anymore. He's a different identity, but he's fabulous. And it has changed the way that he interacts with the world. It has changed who he is. It has changed the way that he speaks to people, the way that he thinks about people. I love Larry so much.
Yep. When you slough off the debris of compulsory heterosexuality, start living your best life. I recommend it, by the way.
Toxic masculinity. Yeah.
I recommend it.
He was hanging on to toxic masculinity to try to like hold on to this idea of what a straight man should be, right? And straight men, you don't have to be toxic. Actually, that's a lie. You don't have to be. So
no, you don't. Nowhere in the manual does it say.
It doesn't say that you have to be toxic. So, free yourself from that bullshit. You don't have to be gay not to be toxic. I'm just letting you know.
What? Oh, no. Oh, I'm with you. Okay. I caught up. I was like, wait, no. No, Lani, that's incorrect. Gay people are just better.
Gay people are just Well, look, I mean, that's a whole long other discussion. The point is,
can you hear
can
the
be
hate
toxic.
mail? I can hear it.
I know, seriously.
Back here.
The point that I'm making is that anybody can be toxic. Anybody can be toxic. But straight men and all demographics, I think, of power. If you are participating in any kind of demographic that has that kind of power that comes on the backs of putting down other demographics, then there's a certain amount of toxicity that comes with that of necessity, and we all kind of have to weed that out, So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying as a white person, there's toxicity that comes to me with that power that I have to then weed out. And toxic masculinity, I think, is something that happens to to straight men, to white men a lot, although it does not necessarily need to be just those demographics. Men in general, regardless of any other demographic, will tend to have that because men have been given this essential power by society. And there is this toxic kind of sense of masculinity that can sometimes come along with that. And it is highly, highly damaging to everybody, including the carrier. The man who has this toxic masculinity as part of their identity. So I'm just saying, you don't have to carry that. You can drop that shit anytime you want. Anytime you want.
The patriarchy! The patriarchy! Whoa. As I fall off of my... Okay.
That's a call out to Buffy and the Vampire Slayer and their lovely patriarchy jingle, which is beautiful. And if you're not listening to Buffering, you really, really need to do that because they are amazing. It's just a wonderful, wonderful podcast. But, all right, let's move into our girl power moment of the week. What do you got for me, Noelle?
Well, I already gave you Cordelia's brilliant, shame is something to be proud of. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Love it so much. Mm-hmm. I love Buffy being ready to charge back into the school to find the source of this violent, hateful voice when she can't hear. I mean, she can't do anything, but she's like, no, I got to go back in there. And everybody says, oh, no, you better not. But she's ready. She knows what she has to do. She has that great power. She feels the responsibility. She's going to do it. And I just love it. And you guys know that I live for parkour, Buffy. When she runs up the railing to the stairs and pulls herself up into the tower, and I love it. I love seeing feminine bodies do athletic things. It always makes me very happy,
fun.
And it's very
it's
badass.
Very fun. Yeah, and an actual real person did that. I mean, it may not have been Sarah Michelle Gellar, but a real person ran up that.
It was a lovely woman whose name I, of course, am blanking on right now. But
I think it's
she's
Sophia
incredible.
Crawford. I think she was the stunt actress at this point. But yes, she's absolutely amazing, and that stuff is just incredible. And so seeing Buffy, kind of do these hand flips onto the roof and get into that tower was pretty excellent. That was kind of amazing. All right, so Noelle, Earshot, what is your favorite moment?
I love when Buffy goes to see Angel and she's going to read his mind because she has this mind reading power, and she's talking to him and nothing is coming back. Nothing's coming back. She talks directly to the side of his head. And then leans in. There's this great, little bit of physicality to it where she leans in, and Angel says, "You can't get into my mind." And Buffy says, "How did you? Why not?" Which I love. She's going to ask him how he knows. And then just goes immediately to why not. And we get the mirror explanation, which I really like. Yeah. But that whole scene with Buffy and Angel is lovely. And then to end on, "I'm a funny guy."
I'm a funny guy. Oh, it's so sweet.
I love you.
It's so sweet. It's so lovely.
What is your favorite part of Earshot, Lani?
Oh, I mean, at the end, Buffy and Giles walking on the school grounds, and then she says, "If you're not too busy having sex with my mother," and then walks away. He just bounces into the tree. That, I think, is one of my favorite moments in all of Buffy. Like the whole entire run, it is a top 10 moment, and just Giles walking into the tree, realizing that she has discovered this. Oh my God. But also, I mean, I really do I think a close number 2 in this episode is when Joyce is standing outside of Buffy's room, and Giles is there with her, and they're both there as parents. And she's like, "I just feel like my thoughts are hurting her." And Giles is like, she can't even hear them now because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
And it was such a really nice moment. And it always makes me kind of yearn for that Joyce Giles romance we never really got.
That we get confirmation that they did it in Band Candy. We knew, but we get actual textual confirmation. I love it.
All right, that's it for today. To join in the discussion on Twitter, follow me at Lani Diane Rich and Noelle at Noelle Aloud, and use the hashtag StillPretty.
Or you can keep Chipperish Media going to the tune of $1 a month or more and gain access to the live chat in Discord, where you can hang out with me and Lani and all the Chipperish patrons who will love you, even if you're covered in slime.
You can also show your support by giving Still Pretty a great review on Apple Podcasts, or by telling your friends about the show, or by yelling at them for having sex with Giles. Although, look, you can't blame anyone for having sex with Giles. I mean, come on, have you seen Giles?
We will be back next time with Choices, the 19th episode of Season 3. Until then, no one else exists either. Buffy is all of us. We think, therefore she is. We will be back next time with Choices.
I think Giles is my sexual orientation.
Must be Giles.
Must be Giles.
Must love tweed. I love your tweed jacket. I bet it would look great crumpled on my floor. Do you enjoy long walks through the stacks? Put me in your library cage, baby.